What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of Best Bets and Props, where I go over all of my betting action for this weekend's UFC card, which is UFC Vegas 76. We've got Strickland taking on Magomedov at middleweight for the main event. Potentially 5 rounds of action between pretty much a newcomer in Magomedov, a very well-rounded skill set, but only been in the UFC 1 fight, already getting the call for a main event spot against a top-ranked Strickland. So that's a pretty fun bout there. There are a lot of really fun matchups on this card. The return of Kevin Lee. We've got a few prospects like Ismail Bonfim, Michael Morales, some really good prospects on this card. Guram Kutadaladze. So hopefully all 12 fights stay intact. We get to see these guys in action on Saturday at the Apex. But I gotta say, it was a pretty tough fight card to find like props and things like that, to get creative and cut down some of these big favorites. Just because sometimes when you have like a Joe Anderson Brito at minus 1,100 or more favorite, sometimes those props go up in price alongside with that money line. So I do have 5 money lines. I think all of them I pointed out in my full card breakdown. And I have 2 long shot props and 1 real prop I've added since talking to Uncle Weezy, who I did a live stream with just last night. So be sure to check that out. Check out the full card breakdown for all details and how these play out. But just for the sake of it, I will make this video always just a concise version of just the betting action and recommended props I'll talk about at the end. But going into the 5 money lines, the first one I have is Carol Hossa over Yana Santos. This is a 145-pound women's featherweight bout. And I'm taking the Brazilian Carol Hossa here. Really good striking output in most of her fights. You know, there's been 3 separate occasions she's actually gone over 120 significant strikes against her opponents, showing not only good striking potential, but good cardio as well over 3 rounds. She's the younger woman here, so still improving compared to Yana Santos. And her grappling is actually pretty good as well. She can mix in takedowns and gain some top control that way. She's coming against Yana Santos, who's on back-to-back losses, just getting beaten down over 3 rounds dominantly at the hands of Holly Holm. And then before that, she got knocked out by Irina Aldana in round 1. And in between those 2 fights was a long layoff. So not quite sure that Yana Santos can return to her prime, which was long before that layoff to have a child. So coming back after that, she's been regressing a little bit, in my opinion. She's somebody who's always been aggressive early, though, but leaves herself open to being countered, and I think she will slow down in this fight. I'm taking Carol Hossa 1.47 units at minus 147 on her money line, just to win 1 unit in return. I believe that money line is still sort of around that price, like minus 160 or so for Carol Hossa. I see a little bit of value there. I would probably price this more accurately around that minus 170 price tag. So just getting a little bit of value. I think she's just, again, going to show some minor improvements at 29 years old. So give me Hossa to win, likely by decision in this bout. Bruno Ferreira is the next money line at middleweight. Very confident in him. After seeing his first couple performances, the one on the Contender Series, round 1 knockout, the one against one of my favorite fighters currently on the roster, Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez, knocked him out in January in round 1 as well. 100% finish rate for the undefeated Bruno Ferreira, who's got a judo background, usually getting takedowns pre-UFC and scoring either a submission win on the mat or a ground and pound stoppage. Now he's taken on a newcomer on short notice. Nursultan Ruziboev is a guy who's 29 years old, has a ton of professional fights, but a lot of them are really sketchy if you go and watch the tape on those European promotions he's competing in. A lot of guys are taking him down. He's letting himself get taken down, only to work his jiu-jitsu off of his back. And usually in round 1, he's getting like a shoulder lock, a kimura, a straight arm bar off of his back. There's just a lot of things that look really sketchy about Ruziboev's strength of schedule so far, level of opposition, and just how fast he gets these submissions, allowing himself to get taken down. Not usually a good strategy once you get to the UFC level. So I think Bruno will oblige him there, whether he outstrikes him on the feet and knocks him out there. I think that's likely. But even Bruno Ferreira going back to his normal routine and taking down Ruziboev and getting a ground and pound stoppage that way, I could certainly see that happening. I just think Ferreira's the real deal. Really smooth stance switching that we saw in his debut. The guy's the goods with all the power in his hands you would want. So minus 168 is the money line I got on Bruno Ferreira. I put 1.5 units on him to defeat the debuting fighter that I think might be exposed as a little bit fraudulent come Saturday. So the third money line I have is on Michael Morales at 170. He takes on 14-fight UFC veteran Max Griffin, who's a pretty good generalist. But Michael Morales, the younger man by quite a few years now at 24 years old. Max Griffin around, I think, 37. Michael Morales also has a well-rounded skill set as well. He's got excellent striking out of both stances seamlessly. He's got really good competent wrestling, and he's got a good clinch game. He's strong there in those positions. He's undefeated. He's got that young man's confidence, but none of the usual red flags, in my opinion, that go with that. His cardio looks pretty good. He's, since coming to the Dana White Contender Series, he's been to a decision now in that performance. He went to a third round against Adam Fugit and finished him there. So his cardio looks like it's pretty good. Maybe if there's one thing he falls apart here besides experience against Max Griffin, maybe the striking output. Michael Morales can be pretty patient and wait for his counter-striking moments. But I kind of see that as a positive thing for him here. He's blessed with a lot of size and reach at the weight class. And Max Griffin, not the most dangerous guy. He's been 7-7 in the UFC so far over a number of years, not facing the best level of competition as far as when they are in their prime of their careers. He's facing a lot of good names that bolster his record here, his resume, but they're not really at their best when he faces them. So not the most dangerous opponents, and he's not the most dangerous guy either. So I don't see him being able to outstrike Morales in this bout. And if he's trying to rely on his wrestling, I think he's going to have a hard time taking down Morales and controlling him. So give me Morales to mix in pretty much all areas of his game, maybe some clinch control and cage wrestling, maybe score some takedowns, but largely if he keeps it on the feet, I think Morales could find a knockout here. So I've got minus 220 on Morales' money line. That's one of the first bets I placed on this card. 2.5 units on this young man. I am paying the chalk on this undefeated prospect at welterweight. Moving on to lightweight division here, Damir Ismagulov taking on Grant Dawson in the co-main event. Man, there's been a lot of line movement in the favor of Grant Dawson this week. Damir Ismagulov moving all the way from like a minus 160, minus 170 favorite, which is where I think he really should be. He went all the way down to minus 108, and at that point I pulled the trigger on him on BetOnline. I think he bottomed out to around like minus 105, but I took it at minus 108, 1.5 units on Damir Ismagulov to defeat Grant Dawson. The guys had better UFC competition, honestly, than Grant Dawson has in terms of skill, facing guys like Rafael Alves, facing guys like Arman Tsarukyan in his last and only UFC loss, and Guram Kutateladze, where he pulled off a decision last year as well. So better UFC competition, great takedown defense, and good get-up ability. If Grant Dawson goes for his normal game plan, trying to spam takedowns without setting them up, I'm not sure if he's going to be so successful with the majority of those, and I'm not sure how much energy he's going to have to expend keeping Damir Ismagulov on the mat. There's an excellent striking advantage in the favor of Ismagulov here. Grant Dawson, very basic striking that he sometimes uses early to set up his takedowns, but by the time he gets tired in round 2 and especially round 3, those takedowns look more and more desperate, and he does not set them up very well. So problematic cardio. I would say that Grant Dawson, though, he's the more dangerous guy here. He's got more finishes at the UFC level. Very good at, once he does get the fight to the mat, superb at controlling, advancing position, and trying to find the back for the rear naked choke. So I do like that part of Grant Dawson's game. He is a round 3 finishing king at the UFC level. I think 3 separate times he's done that in round 3, gotten the job done in that round. So something to watch out for there, but at this price tag, it's a no-brainer. 1.5 units at minus 108 on Damir Ismagulov, who I think wins this fight by decision. And that brings us to the main event at middleweight. I am taking the underdog here, Abus Magomedov at plus 145. Just 1 unit on him at that price tag to defeat Sean Strickland. I know it's a pretty unpopular play this week from what I've seen and the content I've watched. But look, I think Abus Magomedov does present a very unique threat to Sean Strickland that he hasn't seen in a while. He's a more dangerous opponent here with very sniper-like striking weapons, very fast kicks as well. And he's one of these guys with a creative stance switching ability like I've talked about with a couple of other guys on this card that I'm betting on. But Abus Magomedov, if things don't go his way in round 1, he can then come back in round 2 and round 3 with a wrestling game plan, which he looks very proficient at, to be honest. So good ground and pound, some submissions on his record. Now, the only questionable thing here is that Sean Strickland's got all of the 5-round UFC experience. He's headlined several bouts before at the weight class, and he's passed the test against some power hitters like Jared Cannonier, but he has fallen victim to walking right into the power strikes of guys like Alex Pereira. I think getting his head kicked off with the wheel kick of Zaleski dos Santos the other time he's been finished. So, look, I like the consistency of Sean Strickland's game, walking forward, just consistent pressure and volume, but I think that only goes so far with that flat-footed style. That also leaves you to be very predictable to plan for, and I think Abus Magomedov has way more ways to win in this fight, all things considered. Although he is rather unproven at the UFC level, I think at this price tag, I'm willing to gamble on this guy and gamble on his potential to bring something different to the table here. So that's where I'm going with this one. I don't fully recommend that play with a lot of confidence. Otherwise, I'd put a lot more money on it. But I've just got one unit at plus 145. Let me gamble on an underdog here in Abus Magomedov's potential. Again, I've ranted about this so far this week. Now that looking back at picking Sean Strickland so many times, like there's just not a lot of opponents at 185 in the ranked part of the division these days that are that dangerous. You know what I mean? We're seeing even guys like Marvin Vettori and Jared Cannonier, Israel Adesanya, like all these guys are decision machines at the top part of this weight class at 185. So maybe it's just me being optimistic and hoping that Abus can bring some danger threat to this division. But either way, I like him at plus 145. I do agree with some people I've seen where it's like if he gets the job done, maybe it's probably likely in round 1 or round 2, likely by finish. So you can just play those props as a backup plan if you are on the Sean Strickland side. But, man, this could be odd, you know. This could be an odd thing that could stretch out past the 3.5 round mark, and maybe Abus can be a little bit more high striking output than we give him credit for. So give me Abus to pull off the upset. That is all 5 money lines that I'm putting my money behind this week. I do have a couple of props. The one real prop I have is 1 unit on Rinat Fakhretdinov to defeat Kevin Lee by decision. This is something that Uncle Weezy recommended and brought to my attention when we streamed last night. And, of course, Fakhretdinov, a dominant wrestler. The guy's got a tremendous record so far. He's dominated Andreas Michailidis in his debut. I think like 13 minutes of control time and a bunch of takedowns there. Same thing with Brian Battle recently. 14 minutes of control, probably like half a dozen takedowns. But his limited striking skill really does worry me against Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee's a guy who at his best was an explosive striker, a good athlete, very good wrestling background to back it all up. At 155, this bout is at 170, and Kevin Lee has been out of the UFC for a couple of years now. So we're not sure what level of athlete we're going to get with Kevin Lee again here. So I am on the Rinat side, but his money line is like minus 190 to minus 220. Far too much and very disrespectful to a Kevin Lee who could maybe stuff takedowns, employ wrestling of his own, keep this on the feet, and definitely outstrike Rinat. But playing Rinat from this perspective at plus 175 for a decision, which, again, if he's not finishing Andreas Michailidis, who has like a 1-round gas tank, if he's not defeating Brian Battle after breaking him down for 2 rounds, and then, you know, pretty much, I think he even knocked him down in round 3. If he's not finishing those opponents, I don't think he finishes Kevin Lee, who's only been finished by high-level grapplers by submission, and I think 1 knockout from Leo Santos, like way back in the day, 10 years ago. So hard to finish Kevin Lee. Fakhretdinov, been a lay-and-pray decision machine. Give me that plus 175 for 1 unit on Rinat decision. The other 2 props I have, I just have a quarter unit investment between these 2. I actually pointed this out in my full card breakdown. Alexander Romanov versus Blagoy Ivanov at heavyweight. This is such a sloppy fight because Alexander Romanov, a guy with a 1-round gas tank, just going for that takedown, trying to get the job done as fast as possible in round 1. Blagoy Ivanov, a very heavy heavyweight, a guy who weighs in towards the top end of that division weight-wise, and a guy who's very hard to defeat. Never lost by strike stoppage. He's been submitted 1 time years ago. I think it was World Series of Fighting against Alexander Volkov. So it's been years since this guy has been finished inside the distance. So, you know, Romanov is usually going to these weird decisions because he has such a strong, possibly 10-8 in round 1, and then might let his opponent like Marcin Tybura last year take over in rounds 2 and rounds 3. That'll lead to a 10-8, 2 10-9s, possibly a draw, sometimes a split result and a majority decision like last time. So this fight to go to split or majority decision at plus 500, I'm putting 0.125 units, 1/8 of 1 unit. So that's $12.50 at plus 500 for the fight goes to split. Then I've got Romanov and Ivanov going to a draw at plus 8,000 on Bovada Sportsbook, the same price, just 0.125 units. That's $12.50 to win $1,000 if it's a draw. Not many spots you can be confident and find an angle to get a draw result, but looking at just the amount of fouls, whether it's cage grabbing against the takedowns of Romanov, whether it's low blows, we've seen Romanov kind of play up to get extra time when he gasses out, or if it's just a strong start to Romanov in round 1 getting a 10-8 and then falling apart and giving up the decision. The judges could be scratching their heads and we could find some real wacky results here. So that's why I'm playing those for fun. Not many other recommended props on this card. I like the Bruno Ferreira side very much. I like his knockout prop, which is at minus 125 over Nursultan, who's making his debut. I like like I pointed out, the Grant Dawson, Damir Ismagulov fight to end in round 3. That's at plus 800. Either guy can get the finish in that round, especially if Dawson gasses out like he did against Ricky Glenn. Then maybe we could find Damir actually getting a finish in the UFC and ending it late, or most likely it would be Grant Dawson winning in round 3 like he's done several times so far. I think 3 times in the UFC. Dawson in round 3 is plus 1,200. Dawson by sub in round 3 is plus 1,600. If he gets a lot of control time, like a lot of people think he might, he could certainly find the back of Damir, and after breaking him down mentally in rounds 1 and rounds 2, he could find that sub in round 3. So I like all of those round 3 spots on that fight. What else can we do here? I'm very confident in Joe Anderson Brito, very confident in Bruno Ferreira, that they both get finishes, and they both get it under 1.5 rounds. So if you wanted to parlay those, parlay Bruno Ferreira under 1.5, maybe add the knockout, and then parlay that with Joe Anderson Brito under 1.5 plus the knockout. DraftKings doesn't have all of the detailed SGPs for those yet, but I would imagine if you did that, that would be around 4-1 odds is what I'd be guessing. Maybe throw something on that for fun. I could see both of those as likely finish results. But last week, what I did with that same thing was Trevor Peak and Justin Tafa, and both of those crashed and burned. So consider this a redemption for that failed parlay with props. But that's all my betting action and recommended plays. Let me know in the comments what you guys are planning to do to make money at UFC Vegas 76. Whether you agree or disagree with these plays, I would love to hear it in the comments. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, and make sure you guys cash big this weekend. Best of luck. I'll talk to you very soon. Cheers.